Hi everyone, I'm Sarah and this is Budgetsew, where we create stylish, fashionable looks as inexpensively as possible. Today, we're doing a sew along to Vogue 9282, View C in a size 16. Vogue 9282 is a pattern for semi-fitted pants with no waistband, a back zipper, and leg variations. View A's pants are cropped above the ankle. View B and C are full length. Views A and B have slits at the hem with buttons. This pattern has all sizes in one envelope. The pattern sheets are grouped sizes 6 to 14 and sizes 16 to 22. Since I made my pants in a size 16, I gave the pattern pieces for size 6 to 14 to my mom so she could make a pair too. I bought this 2017 pattern online in 2019 from the McCall's Pattern website, which has since been renamed somethingdelightful.com. It was originally $35 Canadian, but I bought it on sale for $6.99 American. You may remember this pattern from my Come On in Vogue sewing pattern haul. The link to the video where I purchased this pattern is right here at the top of the screen. I made two alterations to this pattern. I lengthened the pants by 4 inches along the lengthen or shorten lines, and I moved the zipper from the back of the pants to the front. When I moved the zipper from the back to the front, I had to make sure that I cut the front and back facings differently. I added 5/8 of an inch to the front facing and did not place it on a fold. In addition, I removed 5/8 of an inch from the back facing and placed it on a fold. The recommended fabrics are crepe back satin, gabardine, and lightweight denim. The fabric that I chose was a medium weight denim that I purchased at the Lens Mill store in London, Ontario, as part of their 40% off remnant sale. This fabric was in a bin of denim remnants that were sold by the pound. This denim caught my eye because it was 60 inches wide, had a bright red wrong side of the fabric, and there was lots of it. It weighed 5.41 pounds and was $4.49 a pound originally, for a total of $24.29. With my 40% discount, I paid $14.55, which broke down to $2.69 a pound. The link to my Lens Mill fabric haul video where I purchased this fabric is right here at the top of the screen. Since I had 5.41 pounds of denim, which worked out to be just over 4 meters, I had plenty of fabric left over for other projects, including McCall's 8007, fun flared jeans or bell bottoms, and Vogue 8405, a lovely full brimmed hat. So stay tuned to Budgetsew for the sew-alongs for those patterns.
Since I moved the zipper from the back of the pants to the front, I had to adjust the front and back facings accordingly. I didn't cut the front facing on the fold, and I added 5/8 of an inch to the unnotched edge that should have been placed on the fold. I folded over 5/8 of an inch on the back facing along the unnotched edge and placed it on the fold. After I had cut out and marked my pattern, I ironed on the interfacing to the waistband. Then I pinned the notched edges of the waistband together. Next, I pinned the back and the side back pieces together. Since I was making 2 pairs of denim pants at the same time, I used my tailor's chalk to mark my pieces with the pattern company name and piece. VB for Vogue back, VSB for Vogue side back, VF for Vogue front, and VSF for Vogue side front. Next, I pinned the front side pieces to the front pieces. At my trusty Kenmore sewing machine, I sewed the front to the side front. I chose to use red thread to sew these jeans because of the red wrong side of the fabric. When I started sewing, I forgot to check how much red thread I had in my thread box. It turned out that I only had one spool of Gutermann 347 in color crimson. I called my mom to tell her my problem, and she offered me her red spools of thread. Since my mom and I don't live very far apart, we met at the halfway point between the houses so I could pick up the red thread and get back to sewing. I was surprised at how fast I was going through the red thread, so I placed a Fabricland online order to replace the red spools that I borrowed from my mom, as well as restock my sewing supplies. I ended up buying more than what I had originally planned, but that's part of the fun of fabric shopping. The link to the video of my Fabricland online fabric haul is at the top of the screen. Then I sewed the back to the side back. Since I was sewing view C, I sewed from the top of the jeans right down to the bottom. I love the dark blue color of this denim. Whenever I buy denim, I'm always drawn towards the dark blues. I've never bought a light blue or a pale blue. I've always preferred the navy. My next step was to pin the front and back together at the inner leg edges. This next step is not in the pattern instructions, but is something I wanted to do. I chose to top stitch the front side front seam as well as the back side back seam with my red thread. Adding distinctive details like this make a difference. It makes it look designer. My mom's Simplicity Sewing Book from 1975 says, "Your garment style and individuality are determined to a great extent by the design details that provide the finishing touch. Details such as top stitching, bias binding, matching self fabric closures and trims are the first things that catch the eye." At the sewing machine, I sewed the front and back together at the inner leg edges. I used a Schmetz jeans needle size 100 or 16 to sew my denim pants. This jean needle smoothly sewed the denim with no problems at all. When I sewed this seam, I had run out of my crimson Gutermann thread and switched to the red thread my mom gave me. I've top stitched other pairs of pants that I've made. I made the pants from Simplicity 8999 and New Look 6203 out of a blue queen size sheet. And I sewed and top stitched the seams with emerald green thread. The green thread just popped on the blue background. Then I sewed the other leg's inner seam. I love my sewing machine. It's not a heavy-duty machine, but it's like a tank. It sewed through this denim very easily. I always remove the pins before I sew so I don't jam my sewing machine. I want it to last forever. Then I top stitch the seams. It's best to do the sewing line in one go so that you don't have any back and forth marks. The Simplicity Sewing Book says that top stitching is basically a double purpose, holding seams flat and accenting them in a neat linear manner. It may be done in matching or contrasting thread depending on the effect you wish to create. In either case, the stitching must be straight and even since it will show up distinctly on the finished garment. I lined up the edge of the machine foot with the seam and top stitched, but the Simplicity Sewing Book had some great tips for top stitching. It says, unless you have an eye that is super accurate, use one of the following guides to help maintain perfectly even spacing when stitching along an edge. The throat plate on some sewing machines are marked with lines to indicate the needle distance from the fabric edge. Attaching a strip of adhesive tape on the desired mark makes it even easier to follow. If you don't have any masking tape, try using a rubber band instead. My next step was to match the notches and pin the crotch seam. There are different ways to stitch the crotch seam, but I chose to follow the Vogue pattern instructions. An alternative way to sew the crotch seam is detailed in the Simplicity Sewing Book from 1975. This method is used when both pant legs are constructed. The book says, with the right sides together, place one pant leg inside the other, matching inseams, and baste the crotch seam. Try on the pants to double check the fit through the crotch and adjust if necessary. Stitch the crotch seam with a continuous line of stitching using a narrow zigzag or stretch stitch if your machine has these features. On a straight stitch machine, use a setting of 20 stitches per inch or 2.5 centimeters for this seam, and stretch the seam in the curved area as you stitch. To reinforce, make a second row of stitching over the first row of stitching on the crotch curve. Step 7 of the instructions said not to stitch this section of the seam, but I skipped ahead to step 10, which said baste the opening edge together along the seam line above the large circle. This is where the zipper will be inserted. Rather than sew this seam in 2 different steps, I sewed it in one. Then I changed the stitch length and sewed the crotch seam. The instructions said, stitch crotch seam leaving open above the large circle. Stitch again 1/4 inch or 6 millimeters away in the seam allowance between the notches. Trim close to the second stitching. What is your preferred way to sew the crotch seam of a pair of pants? The Vogue method of laying the pieces flat, or the Simplicity method of one pant leg inside the other? Leave me a note in the comments section below. Then I double stitch the crotch seam for strength, as recommended by both Vogue and Simplicity. I have found that it is much easier to double stitch the crotch seam of a pair of pants rather than to repair it, so always double stitch this seam. My next step was to insert the zipper. I always hand baste my zippers in place before sewing them with my sewing machine. I placed my zipper face down on the wrong side of the front of the jeans and pinned it in place. Then I used some of my old vintage thread from a wooden spool to baste the zipper in place. I used old thread for marking my patterns and basting, but I don't sew with it. The Vogue zipper instructions said, baste opening edges together along the seam line above the large circle. Press, open zipper. Place face down on the extended seam allowance, placing the zipper stop at the large circle and the zipper teeth on the seam line. Baste in the center of the zipper tape, keeping the back free. Close the zipper. Turn the pull tab up. Spread the pants flat. Baste a scant 1/4 inch or 6 millimeters from the zipper teeth and across the lower edge. On the outside, stitch along, basting through all thicknesses using a zipper foot. Remove basting. At the sewing machine, I sewed the zipper in place. I used a zipper foot and started sewing on the right side of the zipper. When I got to the zipper stop, I lifted the zipper foot, pivoted the fabric, and stitched across the bottom. Once I reached the other side of the zipper, I lifted the zipper foot again, pivoted the fabric again, and sewed up the other side of the zipper. Once the zipper was machine stitched into the jeans, I removed my basting stitches. My next step was to pin the front and back together at the sides, matching the notches. I was lucky when I cut out these pants because some of the seams are on the selvage, so they won't fray. About 10 years ago, I gave away all my fabric, all my trims, most of my sewing patterns, and one of my vintage sewing machines. I wasn't sewing because I was working full-time and going to school part-time. I chose this pants pattern because I wanted to replace a pattern that I gave away when I cleared out all my sewing supplies. New Look 6083 was my favorite pants pattern, and I made it up over and over and wore this style of pants every day. This Vogue pattern looks somewhat similar, so I thought I'd give it a try. At the sewing machine, I sewed the front and back together at the side seams. I didn't use a lot of pins because the fabric was quite stiff and not slippery, so I wasn't worried about it shifting. I only made 2 minor adjustments to this pattern. I moved the zipper from the back of the pants to the front, and I added 4 inches to the length. The Simplicity Sewing Book had some great tips for pattern adjustment. It said, the key to proper fit in pants is advanced planning. Major adjustments must be made on the pattern before cutting into your fabric, as they cannot be corrected later. Minor fitting corrections may be made in the final fitting. This is very true. For example, if you are lengthening or widening the crotch, you need to make this adjustment to the pattern piece before cutting it out because extra fabric is required. Then I sewed the other side together. To lengthen the crotch of a pair of pants, cut the pattern piece apart on the alteration line. Place a piece of paper under the 2 cut edges and spread them apart by the needed amount. Keep the grain line straight and the cut edges parallel. Pin or tape the pattern to the paper. Connect the cutting lines. Treat the front and back of the pants in the same manner. Then, with the right sides facing, I pinned the facing to the pants, matching the centers. I hesitated when looking at this because I was concerned my sewing machine might not be able to handle the thickness of the denim. Back at the sewing machine, I sewed the facing to the pants with no problems at all. The Simplicity Sewing Book recommended making a trial pair of pants. It said, the adjustments made in your pants by measurement will eliminate the major difference between you and your pattern. But there will still be some problems that are best solved by fitting a trial pair of pants. Denim or heavyweight cotton are suitable. A woven checked fabric is a good choice. The checks aid in observing grain lines as you fit. Select a pattern with a waistband and fairly straight legs for your trial pants. Cut and machine baste the pants and the waistband. Baste the zipper in the opening. Check the fit of your pants. Pin in the adjustments for decreasing, and insert fabric strips in areas for increasing. Transfer any alterations made on the trial pants to the pattern. Then I pin the facing down to be sewn in place. The instructions recommended understitching the facing, but I wanted to sew it down. To understitch, open out the facing or underside of the garment and stitch close to the seam allowance, close to the seam. Then I sewed the facing down. I used my red thread for all my seams, including this seam. Since I mentioned lengthening the crotch, I thought I should talk about shortening the crotch as well. To shorten the crotch of a pair of pants, measure up from the alteration line to the amount to be shortened. Draw a line across the pattern. Fold the pattern on the printed line. Bring the fold up to the drawn line, keeping the grain line straight. Pin or tape the fold flat. Treat the front and back of the pants in the same manner. Then I clip the curve of the crotch seam. The instructions said to trim the seam line, but I always clip the curve instead. Then I pinned up the hem. I lengthened my pants by 4 inches to ensure that they were long enough so that I had enough fabric for a hem. The pattern comes with an 1.5 inch hem, but I wouldn't have had that if I hadn't lengthened the pattern. I folded over a small hem and then folded it over again to completely enclose the raw edge of the fabric. At the sewing machine, I sewed the hems of the pants first. Remember to check the side length of your pants pattern before cutting it out. Measure the side seam of the pattern from the waistband seam to the lower edge. Compare this measurement with your own measurement plus the hem depth. The difference is the amount to be lengthened or shortened. Lengthen or shorten on the printed line of the pattern located about knee level. For pants that flare below the knee, check your waist to knee measurement against the pattern. Adjust accordingly to retain the original flare of the pants design. Another adjustment that might be needed for your pants is the thigh width. Measure across the front and back patterns from seam line to seam line at the fullest part of your upper leg. Add the front and back measurements. If the total is less than your own measurements plus ease, widen the pattern. If the total is more and you prefer narrow pants, narrow the pattern. Then I used my sewing clips to pin the facing down along the zipper. I hand sewed the facing down and added a small hook and eye above the zipper. Then I sewed the buttons on the tummy of the jeans. These anchor buttons were from a jacket that I bought from the Hudson's Bay Company. I wore the jacket for a few years, but it became quite faded. I cut off the buttons so that they could be reused. Here are the finished pants.
I'm wearing an Anne Klein sweater that I bought at the Hudson's Bay Company. The shoes are Comfort Dex Flex wedge heels from the Payless Shoe Store. I bought the KGB Studio purse at Value Village. The necklace was a gift and the earrings were in a Ziploc bag full of jewelry that I bought for $5 at a church Christmas bazaar. I hope you enjoyed my sew-along to Vogue 9282. Please like and share this video with your friends and family. I love sharing my new, vintage, and out-of-print sewing patterns, and my tips, tricks, quick fixes, and even my mistakes when sewing along with you. I also love sharing my wonderful fabric finds that I thrifted from charity shops, as well as brand new fabric online and in-store. If you'd like to see more from Budgetsew, please subscribe and press the bell so you receive a notification when I release a new video. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Budgetsew. Thanks for watching. See you next time.